On June 13, 2020, the Minnesota Timberwolves announced their plan to make Anthony Edwards the first overall pick in the NBA draft. On draft night, he stood for photos flanked by paintings of two women, his mother, his grandmother, both gone before he turned 15. Before that night, NBA front offices spent months debating whether Edwards was even worth the risk, questioning his maturity, his consistency, his ability to lock in for more than a few minutes at a time. Today, Anthony Edwards is the face of the Minnesota Timberwolves, an Olympic gold medalist and one of the most electric players in basketball. This is the story of how a kid who buried both the women who raised him before he was 15 became the player an entire franchise bet its future on. Before any draft analyst ever broke down his jump shot, Anthony Edwards survived something no scouting report has a category for. Edwards grew up in Atlanta's Oakland City neighborhood, a place his own brother described bluntly. Every city got a hood, but it was crazy. It's a lot of gunshots at night. The family stayed close to home and close to each other, using sports as their outlet to stay out of the way of what was happening outside. Then, within the same stretch of his early teenage years, Edwards lost both his mother and his grandmother. He was still a young teenager, not yet old enough to drive, already navigating the kind of grief most adults struggle to process. The two women who had raised him were both gone before he turned 15.
People close to him noticed the toll immediately, even if it didn't look like grief from the outside. A family friend who watched him grow up said it plainly. "I always say he had an old soul. He was beyond his years. Not necessarily maturity, just he had a soul of an old person. As far as who to trust, who not to trust, he saw things that your typical 8, 9-year-old wouldn't be able to process." That's the part of Anthony Edwards' story that gets skipped over completely when people call him immature or inconsistent. He wasn't just a talented kid figuring out basketball. He was a teenager figuring out how to survive without the two people who raised him. By the time Edwards reached his one season at the University of Georgia, the talent was undeniable. The trust was not. His lone season at Georgia was marked by inconsistency in production and effort. No one who's watched him play doubts his ability. The question is whether he can put it all together. ESPN. He settles. He has trouble resisting hero jumper urges. Teams have to decide whether they should question his frustrating shot chart or look past it. Bleacher Report. This wasn't just about his shot selection. It was about who he was as a person, and teams couldn't get a clear read. Timberwolves president of basketball operations Gerson Rosas described what his front office found when they dug into Edwards' personal life heading into the draft as dicey, explaining that the sheer number of people trying to gain influence over Edwards made it genuinely difficult to figure out who he actually was underneath it all. Scouts even debated whether his college struggles were fixable or fundamental. One major draft outlet posed it directly. Was the inconsistency at Georgia simply a result of immaturity that could be coached out of him, or a deeper red flag about whether he could ever stay engaged at the next level? It was framed as a real open question, not a formality. And in interviews leading up to the draft, Edwards didn't exactly help his own case. Sitting for a profile just months before becoming a probable first overall pick, he admitted, "To be honest, I can't watch basketball." He said he didn't think much about being the top pick. He talked about playing video games and walking his dogs. He wasn't performing the kind of intense, single-minded devotion teams usually want to see from a future franchise cornerstone, and league insiders noticed. The questions weren't unreasonable. They were based on real inconsistency, real uncertainty about who was actually around him, and real ambiguity in his own words about how much he even wanted this. Minnesota had to decide whether to bet a once-in-a-generation pick on a kid that even his own interviews made hard to read. Here's the part of the story that decided everything, and it almost didn't go Edwards' way. Heading into his pre-draft workouts, Word had already spread that his session with the Golden State Warriors, picking second, had not gone well. Minnesota, picking first, was the last team scheduled to work him out. The pressure on that single session was enormous. Before the workout even started, someone in the gym who knew Edwards' circle shouted out a reminder of where he came from. "Hey man, we from Atlanta. This ain't what we do." It wasn't a coach's pep talk. It was a message from his own community, reminding him what was actually on the line. Edwards delivered. Whatever uncertainty existed about his approach in Golden State's gym didn't show up in Minnesota's. The Timberwolves front office, who needed grit, toughness, and physicality on a roster full of skilled but soft pieces, left convinced that the physical tools and competitive edge were exactly what they were missing. On June 13, 2020, the Minnesota Timberwolves used the first overall pick on Anthony Edwards over James Wiseman and LaMelo Ball. A franchise bet its future on a kid whose own front office had called his background dicey just weeks earlier. The uncertainty didn't disappear the moment he got drafted. It took years of work to answer it for good. His rookie and sophomore seasons were exactly what scouts had warned about. Flashes of brilliance mixed with real inconsistency. The talent was never the question. The discipline, the shot selection, the night-to-night habits, those took real time to build, in front of an entire fan base watching closely. By his third and fourth seasons, the version of Edwards that Minnesota gambled on started showing up consistently. He developed into a legitimate two-way force, exactly the grit and physicality profile Minnesota's front office had projected onto him in that final pre-draft workout. He led Minnesota to a Western Conference Finals appearance, something the franchise had managed only once before in its entire history. In 2024, he represented the United States at the Paris Olympics and won gold, sharing a locker room with LeBron James, Stephen Curry, and Kevin Durant, the exact generation of superstars he'd been compared to as a raw, unproven rookie. The kid scouts couldn't get a clean read on was now trusted to wear the USA jersey on the sport's biggest international stage. He became, in every functional sense, the answer to the question Minnesota's front office had spent months agonizing over in 2020. The risk became the reason Minnesota fans had a reason to believe again. Go back to that draft night photo, the one with the paintings of his mother and grandmother standing beside him. A childhood mentor who watched Edwards grow up got emotional seeing it happen live, saying, "When you factor in everything he has been through, it's a storybook beginning. That old chapter of your world is closed. Now it's just about navigating this world." Edwards has never hidden any of this. He talks about Atlanta, about the women who raised him, about the neighborhood with gunshots at night that his family stayed close together to survive. He didn't outrun that story. He built his career directly on top of it. The kid scouts couldn't get a clean read on wasn't hiding anything. He just survived something no pre-draft questionnaire was built to measure.
Anthony Edwards was never just a wild card, a risk, or an inconsistency problem to be solved. He was a teenager who lost the two women who raised him. In the same short stretch of years, scouts were busy measuring his shot chart. The maturity questions were real. So was everything he was carrying that nobody put in a scouting report. He didn't need the league to understand his past. He just needed a chance to show what he could build from it. Minnesota gave him that chance in 2020. 5 years later, the paintings of his mother and grandmother are still the first thing people remember about the night his story actually started.